Hey guys, it's Enigmatic Mr. L. So, with Smash Bracket's channel wrapping things up, it made me want to take a look at the characters in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate and think about what other matchups we could go with in like death battle style versus battles. So, the rules going into this is that I'm going to use the cannon power and abilities of each character, not necessarily the moves and abilities in Smash Brothers, but from their source material. I'm trying to avoid repeating matchups, both with Death Battle and especially with Smash Bracket, but there is one exception just because nothing else really worked. I'm aiming for thematically fitting fights, either because they two characters both have like very sharp similarities with each other, or like serve as parallels, or they're like polar opposites in some way. And lastly, if possible, battles should be close. This is probably the rule that gets quote unquote ignored the most, but that's what happens when you have to make matchups for everyone. I'll be discussing as we get into the matches why I chose these two characters, what the theming is, and also just kind of off the cuff who I think would win, but it's not based off of heavily research, just kind of my initial impressions. So before getting into the list, just a few things to make note of. I'm combining certain characters into one. Mario and Dr. Mario are one. Samus and Zero Suit Samus are one. Zelda and Sheik are one. And Pyramithra are just one fighter. I combined Young Link, Toon Link, and Link, just one composite Link for all the links throughout the Legend of Zelda timeline. I'm not going to be factoring in alternate costumes, so you won't see the Koopalings or like Alex or the Creeper from Minecraft. Mii's, I just kind of count as one character. And Pokemon Trainer is pretty tricky because if you treat him as just Pokemon Trainer, he could have, under his disposal, like multiple legendary Pokemon. If you interpret the Pokedex entries as canon, he could have so much power then, but at the same time, he's still just a 10-year-old kid, and like his opponent could just go straight for the kid instead of the Pokemon. So I'm not using the Pokemon Trainer, I'm just using his individual Pokemon of Squirtle, Ivysaur, and Charizard. So using these combinations and exclusions, there are, I believe, 39 matchups, and there's one character left over, and I'll talk about what I do with that one character at the end. So first battle we have is Mario versus Composite Link. Funny thing to note is as I was coming up with these matchups, originally the one character I had left over was Mario himself, but I realized no, he's way too iconic just to leave out. I think Mario Link, being two of Nintendo's biggest mascots in the series, you could argue maybe Pokemon, but Nintendo technically doesn't own that. It's owned by like the Pokemon Company and Game Freak. I think this matchup, despite being like covered in like rap battles and such, Death Battle hasn't covered it, and Smash Bracket didn't go with it. I think it could be interesting. Both characters have a lot of powers and abilities. Offhand, I think I'd give the edge to Link just because using all of his like weapons and items, they're generally designed more for combat. Mario just kind of runs and jumps. And a lot of his like cartoony feats, they're kind of like ambiguous and inconsistent. Like, yeah, in Mario Party games, you can like swim around a black hole, but those are clearly not acting in the same behavior as what we would call black holes. They're not sucking up every single thing around them. Next, I went with Donkey Kong versus King DDD. Two big guys known for their strength as rivals to the heroes in their platforming games. I think King DDD easily takes this. As yeah, Donkey Kong is very strong, but King DDD regularly fights with Kirby. Character just like splits planets in halves with ease and fights universal level threats on like a daily basis. So I think I'd give this one to DDD. Next, I have Samus versus Mega Man. Two characters, both kind of sci-fi-esque, known for their like guns and projectiles. I'm not super familiar with either series, but offhand, I'd give it the edge to Samus just because I think she faces more like variety of threats, known for quick thinking, that sort of thing. I think Mega Man has a rule he can't harm like other humans. I'm not sure like if that matchup would just get around that, just ignore it entirely, or it would factor in. But either way, I think I'd give the edge to Samus on this one. Next, I have Dark Samus versus Simon, which is basically just science and religion finding out. I think Dark Samus easily takes this. All of her like phazon based attacks could easily like damage and kill Simon, whereas Simon, his arsenal, like, just some of this might be able to do like scratch damage, like the whip and like the cross and such, but a lot of his other moves, like holy weapons, like the holy water, they're generally only like effective against like vampires and monsters and the like. Next, I have Yoshi versus Charizard, two dragon-like creatures that aren't dragons. Yoshi, with certain power-ups, can get like wings and or like breathe fire, and Charizard is not a dragon typing. Despite some impressive things Yoshi can do, the Pokemon are just generally like so strong and busted. Just more consistent fly, more consistent breeds of like breathing fire. I think Charizard will be able to just fly overhead, stay out of Yoshi's way, and take this one. Next, I have Kirby versus Sora, which is basically just two of the most powerful characters using like Smash Bros. Canon duking it out. Um, According to Sakurai, Kirby is one of the very few characters that survived the World of Light, like basically the destruction of the universe. But at that time, Sora wasn't out yet. It was the last DLC fighter, so maybe theoretically he could. I know he scales to a lot of like powerful Disney characters and has all sorts of abilities like time stopping, and that sort of thing. But even so, I think I'd still give the edge to Kirby just for like raw power. I think he's like the most powerful creature, maybe one of the most powerful fictional characters in the universe, basically. Sora's powerful, but I think Kirby's stronger. Next, I have Fox versus Snake, both mercenaries with animal motifs. And I think in just a 1v1 like confrontation, like Snake with his like close quarters combat abilities would have the edge, but just when you factor in technology, I think Fox takes this. Like Snake has like takes control over and fights against machines like a nuclear war, like capable of like mass like world war, that sort of thing. Fox is basically taking on multi-planetary level threats, like scaling across the entire like universe. So I think with a superior tech, I think Fox's technology would be superior, and thus he'd be more likely to take it. Next is Pikachu versus Sonic, both speedy rodent-like characters. Maybe, just maybe, like if you are generous with Pikachu's feats, like defeating legendary Pokemon sometimes in the anime and ignoring the like cherry pick your evidence, ignore the fact when he loses to like a Snivy that hasn't had any battles yet, that sort of thing. You can make a case for Pikachu defeating base Sonic, but the moment Sonic like goes super, just a character who regularly fights like universal level threats, I don't see any way of Pikachu taking this. Luigi versus Diddy Kong, two characters from platforming games playing second banana to their co-star. In general, this is going to come up a lot. I think characters, when they have like more appearances, more like material reference from, you're more likely to find something truly surprising. That suggests high level of like strength, speed, and or durability. And just so for that reason, I think Luigi has a lot more to work with. I think he'd be more likely to win. Ness versus Mewtwo, two incredibly powerful psychic characters. I'm not too sure on this one. I think Mewtwo, like in the anime, like blows up an island and he's like described as having like a savage heart. But in the games, we don't really see him like, just threaten to destroy the world or something like that. And Ness, while he doesn't like defeat Gygas, he does rely on help. The fact that he was able to like hold his own against him for a while speaks volumes to his strength. Especially like if it's canon that like Paula taught him her abilities. He has like his team. I don't know if he's like learned powers from abilities from his teammates like Pooh and Paula. Uh, I think Ness would be more likely to win, but I'm not entirely certain on that. Next, I have Captain Falcon versus Falco, the one matchup that's a repeat, just because nothing else really worked when I was going through the matchups. Two like birds of prey characters known for their vehicles, and yeah, even though this is a repeat matchup, someone could arrive to a different conclusion, or even if they arrive to the same conclusion, they could, interpret ambiguous evidence differently, like that sort of thing. I kind of agree just with like Smash Bracket's conclusion on this. Basically, just in a nutshell, I think Falco is more likely to win. Captain Falcon drives vehicles designed for racing. Falco pilots vehicles designed for destroying other vehicles. So yeah, maybe if it was just a one-on-one fight without their vehicles, like you interpreted the Falcon Punch from the anime's canon, maybe give Captain Falcon, but more often than not, I think Falco takes it. Next, I have Jigglypuff versus Peach, two pink characters. Feminine, even though Jigglypuff can be a boy, it's less likely. A known kind of like magical, like princess-like powers. I think Jigglypuff is more likely to win. Peach, you can like cherry pick it. Just look at games like Super Princess Peach, where she's the heroine, or like the more recent game. Forget what its name is, like Princess Peach Showtime, or like American Super Mario Brothers 2. But just more often than not, she's just a helpless damsel in distress. And the Pokemon have all sorts of like wild abilities, like Moonblast and maybe like healing, that sort of thing. I think Jigglypuff would be more likely to win. Daisy versus Ivysaur, something similar here. We have a plant versus character with a flower for a name, heavily associated with flowers. And just like with the previous matchup, Pokemon are just so ridiculous and powerful, like Ivysaur. If nothing else, he has like Poison Powder, Stun Spore, Sleep Powder at its disposal. Daisy, in the mainline games, she was like a damsel once, just appears playable briefly in Mario Run and Wonder. Most part just relegated to spin-offs. I think Ivysaur would take it. Next, I have Bowser versus Ridley, two major Nintendo antagonists. No matter how many times they're defeated, they always seem to come back. So I'm not an expert on Metroid, but I know while Ridley does come back, like it's, oh, he was killed, but we resurrected him. Oh, he was killed, but we cloned him. Oh, he was killed, but we rebuilt him as Mecha Ridley. Bowser, with one exception, in like New Super Mario Brothers, he just survives anything. Survives lava, survive like black hole, survive a building getting crushed on him. And the one time like New Super Mario Bros. Is kind of an outlier. So for that reason, I think Bowser would be more likely to win. Next, I have the Ice Climbers versus Piranha Plant. You might be wondering what the connection is. It's kind of a parallel fire versus ice, but they're also similar in that they both die in one hit. Piranha Plant, single fireball, dies, jumping in with like the special shoe, dies. Ice Climbers, they just fall from a certain height, touch an enemy, they die. Could be like a funny matchup. I think with like 2 against 1, they could easily distract like Piranha Plant, especially generally speaking, there are exceptions, but his mobility is really restricted. So one could just distract him, the other one goes for a kill with a hammer. I think Ice Climbers would win more likely. Next, I have Zelda and Sheik versus Greninja. Sheik and Greninja is obviously like the 2 ninja characters duking it out. There's also the fact that Zelda disguises herself as a Sheik, and kind of a bit of a stretch, but Greninja with his like protein ability or something can just change its type. Maybe Zelda could win, like depending on how you interpret it, as like her light arrow is effective against evil things, and Greninja's dark typing in Japan it's known as evil typing, and maybe Zelda herself could like some of her attacks would be classified as fairy against dark, but even then, I think like Ninja, especially if they have like it's a hidden ability, just change its type to get rid of that dark weakness. And again, the Pokemon just crazy feats, and just when that happens, I think Zelda's abilities they're more effective against like creatures of evil like Ganondorf and stuff, light arrows, whereas Greninja can just fight anything. So I think Greninja would be more likely to win. Next, I have Pichu versus Olimar, 2 of the weakest and smallest characters in the roster fighting each other. The parallel isn't as strong as others, but this was, I think, the closest matchup I could get for Olimar, just canonically about the size of a quarter. And even then, I still think Pichu would win. Like, yes, this does have some advantages, like Olimar's yellow Pikmin would be immune to Pichu's electric attacks, but even then, Pikachu's much bigger, despite being small, it could just still end up like crushing them. So maybe a bit closer than a Piranha Plant, but I still think Pichu would win. Next, I went with a pair-up battle. So this is why there's, I think, 39 matches instead of 40. So Chrom and Lucina, they get teamed up together in like that spin-off game. It's like Project X Zone 2 or something like that. They can pair up in Awakening. And Pit and Dark Pit are no strangers to like teaming up to fight an Intimate, which I think they do to fight. I can't remember. Do they fight Pandora or maybe it's not Pandora? I can't remember. But they do team up together like late in the game to fight. Would be interesting to see. Lots of ways you could interpret this. Like I think the Fire Emblem games, like if they have like class changing and that sort of thing, they could gain access to like archer skills. And if they adapt like Fire Emblem's weakness, Pit and Dark Pit might be weak to bow and arrows. But then again, they don't technically fly on their own, so maybe that wouldn't count. It's also unclear if like Pit or Dark Pit would have flying powers granted them by either Viridi or Palutena. I think I'd give the edge to Pit and Dark Pit overall, just because they're more like divine. They do have a lot of like variety of weapons in their game. And while Chrom and Lucina are strong, Pit and Dark Pit are like actually divine. But a lot of factors could play into this. That's just my off-the-cuff impressions. Next, I have Ganondorf versus Sephiroth, 2 of the most evil characters in the Smash Bros. Roster and 2 of the most powerful. Well, I do think Sephiroth has like greater strength overall. He's either like casually destroying a planet or like warping someone to a reality where a planet gets destroyed. Ganondorf really can only be killed by like holy weapons, and I'm not sure if Sephiroth would have access to that. So I think it might, take some time, but I think eventually Ganondorf would win, despite Sephiroth having more like raw power. Could be wrong though. Next, I have Roy versus the Aegis. Basically, two characters associated with swords and fire, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. Roy's getting his butt handed to him in this matchup. Anyone who plays Binding Blade knows how terrible Roy is, and it's not just like a gameplay thing, like its stats and growth rates. Like the game's narrative enforces this with like support saying that they're worried about Roy. He's just a 15-year-old kid who gets like drafted, who was in like charge of leading this army, has no business being in just because his father fell ill. And even as someone who only played like the first few hours of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, just a few things like Pyra does there are enough, I think, to defeat Roy. And I imagine they only get like more powerful and insane like as the game progresses. So yeah, similar characters, but not really close matchup. Next, I have Mr. Game & Watch versus Pac-Man, two wacky retro characters from 1980, the two oldest characters on the roster. I'm not really sure what to make of either of them. Pac-Man's mostly known for his original game where he just eats pellets, but there's all sorts of like side games to work with, wacky power-ups. I think I'd still give it to Mr. Game & Watch. Like if you factor in just like transformations, even if he's not quite as powerful as the characters he's imitating, there's just a lot more variety, I think, to pull from, that sort of thing. So that's my thoughts on that. Meta Knight versus Wolf, two rival characters known to the main hero, known for their like ships, the Wolfen and the Halberd. This is a rare case, I think, that despite Wolf having like better technology, maybe like the Wolfen's more powerful than the Halberd, I think eventually Meta Knight would find a way to just fight Wolf like one-on-one, maybe like penetrate the Wolfen, just fight him like inside, would like bring their ships like not factoring in. And Meta Knight, as one of the greatest warriors in the universe, would still find a way to win. But that's just me. Next, I have Wario versus King K. Rool. Two rival characters to a protagonist, both known pretty greedy, like obsessed with food. Wario, like, just has, because of his adventures in like Wario Land, has so many like reactionary power-ups, so many wacky powers. I think more often than not, he has like more to work with than King K. Rool. I think Wario would be more likely to win. Next, I have Ike versus Lucario, two noble like warrior characters like elements of steel. Lucario literally being a steel type, Ike known for his like nerves of steel and his sword. I think just sheer variety of like moveset the Pokemon have. I think Lucario could find ways to keep Ike at bay and eventually take the cake. Plus, I'm not sure like Lucario's steel typing would probably be resistant to a lot of what Ike could do. So even despite Ike being one of the most powerful Fire Emblem Lords, I still think Lucario would be more likely on this one. Next, I have Squirtle versus Bowser Jr., two tiny turtle-like characters, and again, it's kind of parallel water versus fire. Despite having the advantage there, we know in the anime and in the games themselves, type advantages isn't everything. Like in the games, a really powerful fire Pokemon can defeat a weaker water one, and there's also like the anime where like Squirtle loses to like a Ninetales like instantly against like Blaine. So I think Bowser Jr. just with like the sheer variety of powers the Koopa Clown Car has, like all the bomb bombs, all of like the missiles, all that sort of thing, and of course like flight. I think Bowser Jr. would find a way to win. Lucas versus Richter. If Dark Samus versus Simon was like science versus technology, this one's more like the future versus the past. And again, same outcome. The Castlevania character, I don't think, would be taking it. Yeah, he could use whips and such to like hurt Lucas, but a lot of his arsenal only works on like monsters and the like, whereas Lucas's psychic abilities would have no trouble damaging Richter. Rob versus Isabelle, pretty much just a joke battle between two combatants with no real combat ability to speak of. I imagine that this one could be somewhat of a cross between Smash Brackets, Ganondorf versus Isabelle match, and Lucina versus Rob. Like, Isabelle's at her office and Rob just malfunctions, starts spinning wildly, like shooting gyros out. And Isabelle like panics, hides behind her desk, and she like braces up herself, goes and just turns him off. So yeah, while Isabelle isn't strong, she's not just a children's toy. So Isabelle, I think, would win. Although, depending on your point of view, Rob is actually the most powerful character in the Smash Bros. Series because he's actually real, as opposed to the other characters who are not. Next, I have, speaking of Animal Crossing, a Villager versus Inkling. Two Avatar-ish like characters, not really known for combat, sort of, like with an asterisk on Inkling. Because yes, they do have weapons. They're all just kind of like paintball-ish like weapons. I think Villager would be more likely to win. He's known to have like a good strength, like hold up like a coelacanth or something like that with one hand. He does have a few weapons as exposed, like an axe and a bow and arrow, as opposed to just Inkling using paint. And if nothing else, Villager has like enough at his disposal to keep the fight going long enough to eventually just exploit the Inkling's weaknesses against water. Like Inklings have to deal with water in their world. Villager has like rivers and oceans in his world. So either way, I think water would be present, and Villager could work that to his advantage. Next, I have Wii Fit Trainer versus the Joker. So I should probably clarify this one for the Joker. I'm not taking in his ability to use personas into account for two big reasons. One is that he can only use his powers in the metaverse, and with one brief exception near like the game's finale, where the metaverse kind of merges with the real world, he can't use them in the real world. And two, just at the end of the game, he more or less just kind of hangs the cape up, like that sort of thing, without going too much into like spoilers. So he's just a somewhat normal high school student versus a yoga instructor. And Joker would still have a few things up his arsenal. He has like fake guns he could use to like intimidate Wii Fit Trainer, and his blunt weapons, like the knives, like the daggers, they could still hurt as like blunt objects, even if they're not like real. And he's fairly like smart for his age. But that said, I still think Wii Fit Trainer, if Joker doesn't have personas, would be more likely to take it. She's more consistently like athletic, like fit, physically fit, that sort of thing. Although Joker can like raise his fitness to an extent, it's kind of like varies. I think Wii Fit Trainer would be more likely. Next, I have Rosalina versus Byleth, two characters that are ambiguously goddess-like entities. Byleth has the heart of Sothis and eventually merges with her. Rosalina is kind of like guardian of the galaxy, like a guardian of the universe, so to speak. It's difficult to know what to make of Rosalina, but even so, I still think she would be more likely to win rather than Byleth. Like Byleth at the beginning of the game, they almost died just like a common bandit. And like even after they merge with Sothith, they can still like die as you like mislating just like a random sword or axe or lance, that sort of thing. Rosalina, it's unclear what she is, but we know she's existed for like hundreds of years. And if she does appear giant at the end, she probably has some special powers up her sleeve. It's ambiguous how much, but when push comes to shove, I think that would be enough to win. Next, I have Little Mac versus Incineroar, two characters known for like fighting in the ring. This is a tricky one for me because on one hand, Incineroar is a dark type. Little Mac would be a fighting character, and that fits because boxing is real and wrestling is fake. So Little Mac takes the edge. But the Pokemon, like I said before, have like so much tools up their disposal, so much crazy powers and abilities. While Little Mac has like filled with like a variety of like tricky opponents before, I don't think he's faced anything quite as like Incineroar. So I think Incineroar would be more likely to win, but maybe Little Mac, he's known for overcoming the odds stacked against him, so he could prove me wrong. Next, I have Palutena versus Bayonetta. So according to Masahiro Sakurai, while Kirby was the one character to initially survive in A World of Light, these two could have survived as well. They just weren't chosen, partially because their movesets are a bit more complex than Kirby, and Sakurai wanted players to start out with a simple character. There's also just the fact that it would be kind of weird if one of these survived, but then Galeem still got other godlike entities from the game's universe. So that's also just kind of parallel to Light versus Dark. Like in the finale to World of Light, these are two of the last characters you get. Palutena on Galeem's side, Bayonetta on Darken's side. Of the two, I would give the edge to Bayonetta, just because while Palutena is a goddess, her exact abilities and how she scales up to them, it's fairly ambiguous. Whereas Bayonetta regularly defeats god and godlike beings, as opposed to just like being one. So that's what I have to say about that. Next, I have Robin versus Hero, two RPG protagonists, both use swords, both use magic. I think if we allow like taking the fact that Robin has like access to all of the classes in the game, can reclass and get everything, just the crazy amount of like skills and abilities he could use would probably be enough, I think, to take Hero, even without factoring in whether or not he should be counted as like Grima or not, or scaled to like Grima's feats. I don't know much about Dragon Quest, so someone could elaborate further on that, but that's my initial impressions. Next, we have Shulk versus Cloud, two insanely powerful RPG characters who fight like godlike beings. This one could go either way. I'm going to give the slight edge to Cloud. I think he's had more material to work with, and I think a lot of Shulk's abilities, they rely on Ether, which, depending on where the fight was initially took place or managed to like end up, I think Cloud like more consistently would be able to win. Next, I have Duck Hunt versus Banjo and Kazooie. The character, when Duck Hunt was announced, like they had introduced Echo Fighters, like, oh, make Banjo Kazooie and Echo Fighter Duck Hunt. Now they're both in the game. Duck Hunt has a little bit of work with, especially if you factor in like the Hunter, but Banjo and Kazooie have had multiple games, like all sorts of crazy power ups and abilities. I think they'd eventually be able to take the cake. Next, I have Ryu versus Terry, as opposed to Ken versus Terry, just to mix things up a little bit, but I don't think that's going to change the bottom line. While Terry, with Ken versus Terry is a more fitting matchup, both fighting game characters in red, blonde. Ryu is fairly similar to Ken, and I think the differences are similar. I think the similarities are enough that the outcome would be the same. I agree with Death Battle and Smash Brackets analysis on this. Basically, just in that Terry more consistently faces like higher level threats without like relying on help. So I still think Terry would take the cake here. Then we have Ken versus Min Min, two characters from fighting games. I think I'd give the win to Ken. He is a regular member of the Street Fighter cast, has more source material to work with as opposed to just Min Min's one-off game. Probably even if you factor in that Ken needed help, he's probably faced like greater threats than Min Min has. Next, I have Corrin versus Kazuya, two characters just known for like transformation abilities, transform into like a dragon or like a demon slash devil, that sort of thing. And Corrin's just kind of a mixture of light and dark, whereas Kazuya, he kind of has facade of like good guy, but then he's like sinister underneath. I think Corrin just has a wider variety of potentials here, especially factoring reclassing and skills. Fighting like a dragon fighting like a demon devil monster wouldn't be that out of the ordinary for her. So I think Corrin would be more likely to win. And last, I have Steve versus me, two Avatar-like characters from a adventure game with some level of combat. I know Steve does have like there's like the main quest of like fighting the Ender Dragon, but I think if you factor in like all of the Mii's appearances, like all the classes they gain access to in Utopia, their adventures in the Street Pass games, like Find Me, I think there's just way more to work with, more variety of powers, more scaling to like higher foes. So I think Mii's would be more likely to win. And the bonus battle, the one character eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed I missed was Marth. So for just a battle against him, he'd go up against Link, but specifically just the Hero of Time Link, not a composite Link. Even scaling Link back a lot, I still think Link would be more likely to win. It'd be closer, but Marth doesn't have any crazy powerful like abilities to speak of. He does get the Falchion, but that's like super effective against dragons, which Link is obviously not. Link's abilities like time manipulation with Ocarina, just his variety of weapons from that game, I still think he'd be enough to more likely defeat Marth. And those are all the matches I have. As always, thank you so much for watching. Any questions, comments about the matchups I chose, or characters I underrated or overrated, or your ideas for matchups, let me know. Hope you have a good day. This is Enigmatic Mr. L signing out.